IMHO, in my humble opinion, Sir Charles.
It's Max.
And Razor, of course, in the studio. So, listening family, we have another special guest for you all right now. You know by now that IMHO always wants to keep the community abreast, make sure you know about the decision makers and helping inform you and prepare you to yourselves be decision makers. And as of right now, unless you're a public official, you need to vote. If it's in your power, in your rights, get out and vote. And so I think the young lady that we have on the line with us right now would definitely agree with that sentiment of getting out to vote. We have the Democratic nominee for the 5th District Congress, Miss Leslie Cockburn. How are you, Leslie?
Very well, thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, welcome to our show. So, for the listeners who may have heard your name, may not have heard your name before, please just give them an introduction of who you are and why you chose to represent this 5th District in Virginia.
Okay. So my name is Leslie Cockburn. For 35 years, I was an investigative journalist. And I live in Rappahannock County. I live on a farm. It's an hour north of Charlottesville. And I decided to do this because when Donald Trump was elected, I realized that people with my background had to stand up and do something. And for a journalist to become a politician, it's very unusual, but we have incredible skills for this job and to put them to work in the 5th District. And also, we had a congressman who's now dropped out of the race, Tom Garrett, who's in the Freedom Caucus and who is against everything I believe in. And now we have a new opponent who also wants to join the Freedom Caucus. So this is a worthwhile fight.
Absolutely. Now, I have to say, for the person that hears you say that you live in Rappahannock and they live in inner city Charlottesville, what is the connection? Why should they believe that Leslie Cockburn understands the issues that they have from her farm in Rappahannock to inner city Charlottesville? What would you say to that voter?
I think that I'd say to that voter that I've spent over a year traveling around the district asking questions, and I mean asking questions like a journalist asks questions. Like, what is it that you want, you need, what can we do, what are the problems, how can we fix it? And that includes spending a lot of time in Charlottesville. And in Charlottesville, spending time with people like the people at City of Promise or like the people at 100 Black Men at the NAACP, with a lot of different groups who think all the time about the problems of inner city Charlottesville. So I've been around, for example, in Charlottesville, as I'm sure you all know, we have a serious housing crisis. It's too expensive to live in Charlottesville. So I've gone around, looked very closely at the housing issues and how that needs to be fixed. Not to mention a lot of the other things that are affecting people very deeply in inner city Charlottesville.
So give us some of your thoughts. What do you think needs to be done here in Charlottesville to fix the housing crisis?
Say that one more time. What needs to be done in Charlottesville
to help with affordable housing, so that people can actually afford to live here,
Okay, well, interestingly enough, I mean, we need federal dollars. Federal dollars, there's a squeeze on for federal money coming into housing. First of all, the list for public housing is actually closed. There are so many people on the wait list.
I believe that.
But affordable housing, if we don't get affordable housing in Charlottesville, which can be done with federal dollars, if we don't get it, then so many people who work in Charlottesville, they have to live in Buckingham or they have to live in, far away, Nelson. And that means huge transportation problems. So I've been over to talk to the Jaunt people about transportation for people who have to live so far away. But also I've spent time in neighborhoods old neighborhoods in Charlottesville, old African American neighborhoods, where people that are stable, and we want people to stay in those neighborhoods rather than being pushed out with gentrification. So how do you do that? And I think that that there are a lot of local groups who are trying to do that, and the congressperson's job is to help fund those groups.
Yeah. Now, so how would you combat, or what's your plan to combat that $1 million, possibly $1 billion developer that's coming through, and maybe saying to city council, hey, here's the kickback you can get. Let me build another luxury hotel. Let me build another luxury condo. Do you think that we really can fight that?
I do, in the sense that you take that developer. You have to make sure that part of the requirement is that developer has to put some money into or set aside some units for affordable housing. And you can also do it with tax breaks so that people who invest in affordable housing get really good tax breaks, so that you have an incentive for people to want to do it. Also, a lot of small businesses in Charlottesville are they want their employees to be able to live there. So I think we can build a coalition here to make it happen.
How you doing, ma'am? I have a question for you. What plans do you have we have a problem here in Charlottesville where there's no trades. What plans do we have to help employ some of these people that live in low-income housing?
That there's no trade?
No, you said getting money to help with the housing, but there's a lot of people that live in housing don't have jobs, so trades would be a way for people to be able to become self-sufficient. What plans do you have to increase that?
Well, I think what I've been doing is looking, everyone talks about training programs. So I've been going around the district looking at the best training programs where people who are in those programs get jobs right away. And there's one, for example, down in Campbell County called VTI, Virginia Technical Institute.
IMHO family, once again, we are speaking with Leslie Cockburn. She is the Democratic hopeful for the 5th District of Congress. And Leslie, I think Max had a question for you, follow-up.
I did. Since we're talking about, affordable housing, and more specifically, low-income families, there's been a recent policy that's been put in place here in Charlottesville when it comes to public housing, which is no smoking. They aren't allowed to smoke, within their housing units, which I personally see a problem with, because that's either going to result in fines or possibly even eviction, as far as implementing those rules. A lot of low-income people smoke, matter of factly speaking. And so with, tobacco manufacturers putting in ingredients that are addictive, and then you put policies in place like you're not allowed to smoke within your housing units, I see a problem there. I see a lot of people getting evicted or what have you, and so I was just wondering whether or not you had any thoughts or saw any particular issues with policies like that in place, and manufacturers, creating products as they are.
Well, I think it's crazy to not allow people to smoke in their homes. I can understand why you can't smoke at a restaurant or a public place, but at home, I think you should be allowed to smoke a cigarette. I mean, clearly, yes, a lot of people do smoke, and I think that's really an overreach. And to use that as a reason to evict someone is pretty outrageous, I think. That's my view.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
And so, Leslie, how about you give us a quick rundown, and then we can elaborate on them. But the pressing issues, your campaign, what exactly is it running on?
The number one issue that everybody cares about in the 5th District, whether it's rural or urban, is health care. And right now we have a crisis in Charlottesville where a policy in Charlottesville for a family of 4 costs 23% more than anywhere else in the United States. including the Aleutian Islands, where you have to be medevaced out. So this is ridiculous, and it's happened. It's gone way, way up under Trump, and it's because we have a monopoly in Charlottesville, because the Trump people pulled out the legs from the Affordable Care Act, saying that we're not going to subsidize insurance companies, so there's only one insurance company left, and they just jacked up the price. So now a family of four can pay $3,000 a month with a $12,000 deductible. You know, people can't pay it. So, you know, that's one great reason why at the state level that Medicaid has just been expanded. Because really, those kind of prices, nobody can pay them. And that has to be turned around.
Yeah, so let me ask you, is that fully something that has changed and the blame is on the Trump administration, or does that even date back to when it was to when Virginia rejected the federal funding even years ago?
Oh, you mean Medicaid expansion?
Right, yeah.
Well, Medicaid expansion, I mean, look, we've got it now. So it's a great thing, and it's because we have so many Democrats now in Richmond, which we didn't have a year ago. But I think at the federal level, what we have to do is push in the direction, we have to restore the Affordable Care Act, because they're pulling it apart. I mean, the Trump people right now, what they're trying to do, that came out on Friday, is they're trying to say that right now, Obama put in a requirement that if someone has a pre-existing condition, you have to give them insurance no matter what. And the Trump people are trying to remove that and say it's unconstitutional, which would rip out the heart from the whole Affordable Care Act.
Now, let me ask you about the urban versus the rural health care dichotomy that we have, because a lot of times, rural areas, they get the VDH grants and things of that sort, but there's people in public housing in Charlottesville and in urban areas who really get short in because they're told that, well, you live in Charlottesville, so you don't have any excuse not to be healthy. Like, UVA health system is right there. So how do we fix that divide between, rural, like Southwest Virginia, getting more attention and care than, say, Charlottesville?
Well, I think I wouldn't say it that way, because you've got serious problems in the rural areas with access of people being able to get to health care. But in Charlottesville, you have a remarkable situation. For example, if you are an African-American woman in Charlottesville, you are many times more likely to die in childbirth than if you're white. So we have health deserts right in the city. And this is something that some people are trying to address on a local level, and federal funding can help them do this. And it has to do with creating a system where you have people attending to women all the way through, whether it's before they give birth, during the birth, and after, so that they're not constantly seeing different doctors, different nurses, that they have someone who really is assigned to them. And so there's a new group of people who are called birth sisters, who are really helping with this situation.
Yeah, they are.
But the medical crisis in Charlottesville is acute, and I'm very much aware of it.
Yeah, sure. I'd also like to talk to you about gun reform. What are your thoughts on that? You have some who say it's my constitutional right, others that say we need reform, and then meanwhile, for example, in these schools across the nation, innocent people are dying. So what work do you plan to do there?
Well, everyone in Virginia loves their guns. But I grew up in a hunting family with everyone hunted, but I also, as an adult, I was a journalist covering war zones. I covered 6 wars, some of them many times. And in those situations, I got to see weapons of war used many times, and the difference, for me, the difference between a weapon of war and a hunting weapon is total. This is not the same thing. And in the gun discussion, that has to be made clear. So I support there's an assault weapons ban, 2018 assault weapons ban. But many people would keep their assault weapons, and we have collectors. So for those people, all guns should be registered.
Okay.
And okay, go ahead.
No, I was actually that's where my train of thought was going as well. Because I'm a big advocate for registration, so I definitely want to hear you elaborate on that, because I just feel like that is a serious bottleneck to where if a gun, when it's manufactured, it's traceable by its, serial number. So if our politicians truly were serious about registration, in my opinion, that could cut a lot of the crimes, because it has to trace back somewhere, and somebody has to be held accountable.
But a lot of these crimes are being committed by registered gun owners.
True, but so you're absolutely right. But the ones that's not, like where there's guns that may be in the streets, particularly inner city communities, to where people are like, well, how are these guns getting in these communities? But also with the school shootings that you mentioned, Max, like I don't know why the parents aren't being held accountable. Like, why does the teenager have access to an assault rifle? Mm-hmm. Why aren't the parents being held accountable for this? So Leslie, I want to hear your elaboration on registration and so forth.
Okay. Because each one of these situations is a little different. Yes, I think guns should be. I definitely believe in registration. I think it's good, and I think it's something that we can push, because even gun owners are for it. But in terms of someone taking their parents' guns, we should mandate gun safes. There's no reason not to do that, and if people can't afford a gun safe, we can try and subsidize gun safes. There are so many kids who are killed by mistake at home because there's no gun safe. That we need to fix. And also, if someone is convicted of domestic violence, I don't think they should have a gun, and I think that cuts about 50% of these massacres in this country. So there are different problems for different situations. Like, for example, the Texas church massacre, that was committed by someone who was a known, domestic violence offender. So that person, in my mind, should not have had a gun. And gun show loopholes. We need to fix that. Okay. And there are so many of these things that everyone agrees on. You'll get, even among gun owners, you'll get 70-80% of people agreeing on that. So let's push all these things. The only group that doesn't agree with a lot of this is, NRA.
How about actions that should be taken within our schools? Because, there's talks about arming the teachers, police in the school, armed security guards, things like that. What's your opinion of what should happen within the schools to protect the kids?
Well, I feel that, first of all, I really do not think that arming teachers is the right way to go, because, first of all, the teacher's not going to have an assault weapon. And, if they have some small weapon up against an assault weapon, this is not going to be a match situation. And if you look at statistics, even with police, it's very easy to shoot the wrong person. We could have teachers shooting children by mistake in a crisis. And as far as police, a lot of these schools have had security guards on campus, and they have been unable to do anything. Right. I think we have to review and have a look at some of that security guard training. I think that people, that at least in the situations that I've seen recently, there's a kind of a reluctance to address the situation quickly enough, and also the police response is too slow. We've had cases where kids have been on their phone in the middle of a shooting situation, right, repeatedly trying to get a hold of police, and the police have not come. And that is a real problem, and it happened in Las Vegas, too.
Yeah. And as a black man and father of black sons, I can also express my fear of there being armed adults who already are questionable if they have black kids, best interests at hand, and then to arm them, and then for my son to get confrontational, to think of where that could lead and it be called an accident. That's some worries I have. And Razor has a question for you. And before we go to him, I wanted still to see if you had anything else to say about the accountability piece before we go to your next issue. As far as whether it's registration or what have you, should the kids be accountable for doing the crime with the firearm, or even say someone that commits a crime with a firearm that's not registered to them, or should it be the parent? Should it be the person that registered that gun? Like, do you have the accountability preference?
Well, I think that you have to look at the individual situation. But I think we should have gun safes. I think parents should be accountable in that sense, that if they have a weapon, they need to lock that weapon up at home. And also, in terms of registration, we have to. I'm not going to give you a slate of how people should be held accountable. But if you have done registration, there's going to be more accountability. That's for sure.
Gotcha.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO family, we are speaking to 5th District Congress hopeful for the Democratic ticket, Miss Leslie Cockburn. And Leslie, I think Razor has a question for your comment.
Yeah, how you doing, ma'am? I'm new to politics and everything, so a lot of the questions I have kind of pertain to the people that the politicians really don't really look at after they get the vote. So the majority of our listening audience is African American, but a lot of the issues that are talked about before people get voted are like, okay, we're going to help the African American community do this. But after everything happens, it's like everything dissipates. My problem that I'm having is there's a lot of things that you said that really don't involve the African American man. Like when you said about people being domestic violence being the charges being brought up on people for domestic violence, a lot of times the African American man is charged, but his counterpart isn't charged. So at that point, he's not going to be held accountable, have to register certain ways. So that's and this is no shot on you, but that's the issue that I have with politicians, is that a lot of the heads of the household, the black men, the issues that we're talking about don't really involve us. I think as a politician, if you really want to reach the African American community, you're going to have to come up with things that help restore the African American family. And I'm not really hearing where those two are intermingling.
All right, let me say a couple of things about that. One, if you want to get something done on Capitol Hill, you have to have friends who can help you, who are already in Congress. One of my big supporters is John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, and I think you know who he is. So if you have support from people like that, and you get up to Congress, then you work together, because he is so much more senior than I would be coming in as a freshman. And in the whole area, I've been endorsed by the Congressional Progressive Caucus. So that's Keith Ellison. There are a lot of senior African American figures who are the ones who are really controlling certain policies. And if you have more Democrats who support them, then you have more votes that support black men. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am. But I'm also noticing that we can't even get justice when the cameras show that injustice may have been done. So do you think that rules can be put into place to help us along those lines?
I do, and I'll tell you, there are several bills. I think there are 5 bills right now on the table in the House of Representatives about police conduct, about, that would address a lot of issues with young black men and in police situations. So again, we need more Democrats so that those bills go through. It's you know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We simply have to have more people. We have to flip the house so that those things can be put in place.
So if we have people on the board, you're saying that will help us?
Yeah, we have there are bills ready to be put into law that people have already signed off on, but we need more Democrats to sign those bills because the Republicans are not signing those bills.
Will that help us along? Will that help us along the way when it comes to like the prisons? Like I know that there was a misconception about the prisons being owned, privatized, and then we found out that was wrong here in Virginia. But a lot of the judges may be on the boards of these things, so the votes are still being slated. Like, how do we find out, or where do we go to our Congress people to find out how to get help with this? Because we have a definite problem that nobody's really talking about, the elephant in the room.
What, talking about criminal justice reform?
Yeah. For the African American male, it all ties in together. One snowballs into the other.
Right. So, but breaking it down in terms of just thinking about what one can do as a congressperson, there are two different pieces here. One is school to prison pipeline. So I've been talking to a lot of teachers about what happens with African American kids in middle school. How are they getting left behind? What can be done to fix that piece so that you don't have kids falling through the cracks? And it's a matter of funding. We need more funding for special education, so it's a broader group of kids. And we also need more funding for counselors so that they don't have to deal with so much bureaucracy and they can really concentrate on the kids and building relationships with a child's family. I think something like City of Promise, they do that very well. You have a whole group of mentors who really pay attention to kids and help them get through this period so that they don't end up in the justice system. And also just making sure that instead of sending a child to the police, that you send the child to the principal. And it is very clear that there are so many more African American kids who end up in that situation, and that has to be reversed. But we can deal with it by putting more money into our public schools. It will really improve things.
And so you're also telling Razor to vote for you because you're going to fix it for him. That's what this boils down to, right, Leslie?
Well, I think that if you vote for me, you're going to get a lot more attention. Right now we have a congressman, and the person who's going to replace him, the Democrat who's going to run against me, they really don't care about these issues. This is not on the front burner for them at all. Not to mention, we have other things going on in this district that are very important to African American communities. We have a frack gas pipeline that's going to go right through a historic freedmen community in Buckingham. It's called Union Hill. Those are African American families that have been there since the end of slavery, and this pipeline is going to come right through their community, and they're going to put a giant compressor station there, which will cause huge health problems and will really probably decimate this community. So I think that that there are many pieces of this, not to mention the pure and simple racial justice issues that have to be addressed since last August 12th.
Right, and before we go too far down the road, I think Max had a question for you.
Yeah, just one more question for you. There's certainly a difference between prison reform and sentence reform. And so I wondered your thoughts as it pertains to sentence reform. And then I wanted to ask you whether or not you thought marijuana could be legalized here in Virginia.
I think that legalizing marijuana in Virginia would help so much with, look what's happened in D.C. It's just such an improvement. It takes away an excuse to pick up an African-American teenager with something, a small bit of marijuana in their pocket. I think that right now we've got 2.2 million people in prison, and way too many of those people are African American and are in there for small drug offenses. So yes, I think that's an excellent idea. I would support that, and it's also something that we have an opioid plague in this district, and if you legalize marijuana, you're going to have that's a better solution to people's pain issues than opioids. So there are lots of aspects to that. But yes, there should be. I mean, the whole piece of criminal justice reform, I would support many reforms on that front. And the whole emphasis is get these kids who do not belong in the prisons out of there.
You hear that, Razor? The marijuana is my pain medicine.
Yeah, I hear. I need that sentence reform to match that,
though. So Leslie, well, once again, I want to make sure our listeners know, if you're just tuning in, we are speaking with 5th District nominee for the Democratic ticket, Ms. Leslie Cockburn. Leslie, one of the things that I hear you seem to be alluding to quite a bit is that relationship with particularly the African American community and those who already are in good standing. So I'm curious, do you have any initiatives to get more minorities involved in public office or encouraging them, whether it's through grants or what have you, scholarships to study law and things of that sort, so that they could be decision makers?
Yes, I mean, for example, there was an event not too long ago run by 100 black men, and they give scholarships to incredibly deserving kids from around Charlottesville and around the region. So I gave one of those scholarships. I think that that kind of work of mentoring kids, giving them scholarships, and particularly I'm very interested in the whole crisis of student loans. I think that the whole student loan situation has to be dramatically reformed because we're creating a situation where kids get huge amounts of debt, and it just cripples them for years and sometimes forever. So I do support that. I support every possible way to make sure that an African American child has an equal chance.
Touched on quite a bit. So what issues are we missing? And for our whole listening audience, we have people that actually stream this show worldwide, not to mention all of Central Virginia. So what other issues really top your bill that you want to make sure that our listeners know where you stand?
Okay. I mean, I mentioned the opioid crisis. Yeah, that's really something I'm looking at for how to get money to the right clinics that are run by recovering addicts who really understand how much time it takes and how much care it takes to get someone through that problem. And we have big jobs issues in the district, and I've been looking very closely at what kind of jobs, how do we need to build new industries in the district. So again, because I'm a former journalist, I've really been digging into that issue as well. And also, we have so many people living on the edge, and our minimum wage is not a living wage. I'm seeing people who not only have 3 jobs, some people have 4 jobs. I mean, I met a woman recently who's involved with that great organization, Touch'em, who take care of you if you're homeless. And she herself was homeless and had to work 4 jobs to dig herself out of that hole. So we need a living wage in Virginia. We need a living wage in the United States. And it's the only way that you're going to possibly put people in a situation where they can afford to live. It's a critical piece of all of this.
Yeah. So what methods are you planning to tackle that? Because what's going to happen, Leslie. As soon as you talk about people need to get a living wage, you're going to be called a communist, you're going to be called a socialist, and they're going to say that's not democracy. I should be able to make as much money as I want and have as cheap as labor as I can get. So how are you going to fight the big businessman?
Well, I think that even Walmart now is paying people, $11 an hour. It's a lot more than $7.25, which is the minimum wage. So, and even West Virginia pays much more than Virginia as a minimum wage. So maybe we can shame people into it or make them competitive.
Well, one of the things that I saw, that you're supporting is higher pay for women, which I'm cheerleading for.
Yes, equal pay for women. Unquestionably. It's a huge issue for me as a working woman my entire adult life. We need equal pay. And we also need equal pay because when women get old, if they're not getting equal pay, they get less Social Security, and you have really serious poverty among elder women because of that. So I'm going to fight very hard for equal pay.
Speaking about Social Security, aren't there some type of, I don't know, like movement to defund it?
To defund it?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the Trump administration is waging war on Medicare and Social Security. I mean, Trump in his last budget, he wanted to take out, $500 billion from Medicare. And even because they put through this tax bill that adds so much money to the deficit, it's $1.5 trillion onto the deficit, which means you have automatic cuts in Medicare, $25 billion a year. That really hurts older people, and we have to make sure we got to shore up Medicare, and we've got to shore up Social Security. It's these things have to be restored, repaired, and cannot be touched.
Well, since Max alluded, it's like the women's right thing. Can Razor and I and other men get maternity leave as well? Because there are some dads that take care of their kids. Because I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of not, Leslie.
Listen, I would absolutely support that.
Awesome. Okay.
If you're looking after your kids, of course you should get leave. I think that should be equal, no matter what gender.
Now, I'm sorry, Razor, were you going to comment on that?
Yeah, well, when she was talking, I want to commend you. Everything that we're asking you, I love the way that you're answering, and I know a lot of times y'all get bombarded with questions and nobody tells you when they think that you said something that really hits home for them. So I want to commend you for that. But if I had to ask you, right now, if you had one thing that you wanted the African American community to know about you that you're going to stand for, what would it be?
I hate questions like that, the one thing. But let me give you an example. Just recently, our congressman voted to take away the right of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to protect people against discriminatory auto loans. Everybody gets an auto loan. Right now, you can be discriminated against. In other words, you can pay more. If you're African American or Latino and you have the same credit score, you can pay more unless the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is allowed to come after these auto dealers and make sure that this doesn't happen. So the right-wing congressman that we have just voted to take that right away from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. In other words, people are going to end up paying a lot more for their auto loans. That's the kind of thing. It may seem like a small thing, but it's not a small thing for everybody who has one of those loans. It could make a big difference.
Same thing happens with housing, right? And no matter what the loan is, it seems the minority gets critiqued a little more than the counterpart.
That's right. I did a big major documentary that was a feature documentary on the whole financial meltdown. And what I found was I was working a lot of that, a big piece of it was in Baltimore, inner city Baltimore. And I found that there was reverse redlining going on. In other words, African American families were being pushed into subprime loans, even if they could qualify for a regular loan. And the people working for the banks that were pushing that stuff were actually getting rewarded for doing that to people.
Why is it so hard? I'm sorry. Why is it so hard for African Americans to get business loans?
Well, okay, right. I'm with you on that. It should not be any different from anyone else.
Do you have anything in place?
Do I have anything in place?
Yeah, when you were talking about like different reforms and whatnot, do you have anything in place? Because it's a difference between saying, "Yep, that's a very serious problem," and actually saying, "That's a serious problem. This is how we're going to combat that."
Well, let me just finish what I was saying about reverse redlining, about housing, is that fortunately the banks, people went after Wells Fargo, which was one of the banks that was doing that, and they paid a huge fine for it. So I think that when you see something like that, if you find, this is where the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau comes into play, which the Trump people are trying to destroy it. The Obama administration created it to protect people from just these very things. So if you want to talk about business loans and not having discrimination in business loans, we need to protect this government agency that Obama put in place.
Gotcha.
That's how you do it.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we are speaking with Democratic nominee for the 5th District of Congress in our state of Virginia, Miss Leslie Cockburn. Leslie, something popped in my head. I wanted to backtrack a little bit when you were talking about the opioid crisis. Should pharmaceutical companies or people who abuse their pharmaceuticals be held accountable or should be charged as criminals for criminal activity? And let me just elaborate on it just a bit by saying, it seems like that when there's, what's called street drugs, which are normally in communities of color, it's quick to be criminalized. But to me, my opinion, it seems like that because, a pharmaceutical pill abuse, opioid abuse, tended to be more in middle America, tended to be more in the suburbs, that, like there were the white gloves that came out and said, okay, like we got to fix this problem, we're not going to criminalize it. So I'm curious on your stance when it comes to, looking at like whether it be crack cocaine, marijuana, as we mentioned, versus the opioids. Do you think there should be a level playing field, or is there a difference?
I think there should be a level playing field. And I also think that we've had some really good investigations now of the pharmaceutical companies and, pushing opioids, pushing pills. Mm-hmm. They have been doing this. The city of New York has sued, and a variety of states have been suing them. Those lawsuits are going to result in, huge fines, I believe, and perhaps criminal charges.
Okay.
And Congress needs to be right behind them with the kind of hearing where you really hold people's feet to the fire. Mm-hmm. And that's something, because I have a background, in 60 Minutes and all that, that's something that I can really be involved in and be very useful in that area. Because it's not just big pharma, it's also insurance companies. Insurance companies made it a lot easier and cheaper to get addictive opioids than painkillers that are not so addictive. Mm-hmm. Now that's really a serious problem. And so all of these really big businesses who've made so much money out of this addiction, I think that all of those people should be held accountable.
So let me share the opposite side of that as a patient. Had a motor vehicle accident a few years ago. Went to the doctor because I could literally barely walk this year, and was not given pain medicine for it. So I kind of just rolled with the punches, didn't offer me any pain medicine whatsoever, knew what I ranked my pain on a scale of 1 to 10, could visibly see that I couldn't walk. I went home and ended up dealt with the pain for, a few more days, ended up calling back and got into an argument with the doctor because I said, you know what my pain is, you didn't offer me any medicine whatsoever. Her response was, well, you didn't ask for any medicine. So then we're kind of going at this back and forth like you're forcing me to have to deal with the pain as a result of, the abuse that we know so many people, undergo. So it's kind of you put some people in like a catch-22 when they actually need the medicine, but the doctor's reluctant to give it because of, the people that are abusing it out here.
Look, I think that patients clearly should be given the pain medication that they need. But what's interesting that there are some pain medications that are less addictive than opioids, which can be given, and the structure of the insurance companies have been that it's cheaper and easier for people to be given opioids. So I think that that's a problem, but I think that the other problem is that so many people, when they have a serious accident and they have a lot of pain and they're given opioids, they're given way too much. And I think that the doctors need to be careful about that. But of course you should be given pain medicine if you're in terrible pain. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I was not given anything.
That's the right of the patient.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Should have got some of that medical grade marijuana.
Well, listen, this is what she told me. She said that I didn't give it to you because you didn't ask for it. And I had to explain to her, if I had walked in your office and said, I'm in excruciating pain,
As a black
give
woman.
me some medicine,
Right.
you would have looked at me like, okay, what's the bigger problem here?
As a black woman.
Well, if you're in serious pain and you can't get pain medication, I think that's a real problem. I think that needs to be addressed. And if it's because you're a black woman, that's an outrage.
Yeah, no, there's no. Now I can testify because I took it to the doctor a couple times. When African American, like, there's certain things that, like, I've never met you before, but there's certain shoes that you're going to be unable to walk in. When you, with the crisis that you have on drugs right now, when you walk in there, sometimes you can visibly see the way the doctor said, like, do they really need this medication, or are they abusing? For some reason, when it comes to African Americans, a lot of times we're always viewed on the worst side of things. If something can be bad, it's going to be bad more so because we're African American.
Yep.
So one thing that I want to say is, like what you said, like, people are giving way too much medication, and I know for a fact that was the case, how all this stuff got started. But now that the people who can't get those opioids are going over to heroin, and we're having these addictions and stuff, and the police are being told, okay, don't lock them up, give them some type of medication to shoot into them to, like, so they're dope sick and throw up and all this other stuff. It just seems like it's slighted, because Charles said it very well, but I'm going to just say what it is. When it came to the black side of drugs, it's like incarcerate them till people were overflowing out the windows. But when it came to where it hit on the Caucasian side in their front door, now we got an epidemic. It was a war on drugs, now it's an epidemic. It's just more of the same rhetoric that we're going through, and everybody tries to talk around it, and before you know it, 4 years have passed, nothing has really been done. We put things in place that don't apply. There's always a loophole on the negative side when it comes to us. So I hope that you are one of these congressmen, council people, political figures that really step in the line of fire, because they're going to come at you. If you really try to help, they're really going to come at you. And I hope that you really can withstand the fire.
Well, I've been in a lot of wars, so I think I probably can handle it.
There you go.
Yes, ma'am.
So as we wrap up, and I appreciate all this info, and I'm sure and hopeful that our listeners have as well, and I appreciate your time. We're probably gonna have to make this two-part series here, but I think it's worth hearing in full. Unless Max has anything else, let her close out in her way. But the one thing that comes to mind, Leslie, is with all the great ideas that I hear you saying and all the great work that you want to put in place, it's going to take money. Everybody knows that. Whenever you want to make change and when you want to implement good programs and what have you. So I'm curious on your stance, because you know how Democrats get pointed the finger at, and sometimes it's a little unworthy and unjust. But when it comes to being looked at as the big spenders, a lot of people say Democrats, jack up the debt and things of that sort. So I'm curious about when you want to do these things, do you think that we need to redirect our spending, or do we need to increase taxes? How are you going to pay for what you want to do?
We have so much money sloshing around Washington, you cannot believe it. And look, we have spent almost $6 trillion on endless wars since 2001. $6 trillion. I think we need to change our priorities. Let me give you an example. Right now, I think that community college should be free. And people say, how are you going to pay for that? And the answer is, let's make education a priority. Right now, on an Air Force cargo plane, there's a toilet seat cover that costs $10,000.
I need to get in that business.
That's an example of how we need to change our thinking.
Okay, so I hear you saying that we just need to redistribute the money that we have, because there's a lot of wasteful spending.
I would say that the Republicans love spending money. They just gave corporations a $1.5 trillion tax break. That's spending money. That means that money is now deficit spending that our children and grandchildren are going to have to pay for.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking to Leslie Cockburn, Democratic nominee for our 5th District here in Virginia. Leslie, thank you for joining us, and just want you to be able to close out in your own way. What word do you want to leave with our listening audience? What do you want to let them know about the upcoming elections?
What I want the audience to know is that we can change things. Just like last November, we had elections for the House of Delegates in Richmond. A lot of Democrats got in, a lot of women got in, and now we have Medicaid expansion. So it is possible to change things in Congress in the same way. We just need to flip the House.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time, Leslie. We appreciate you. Okay, family, you're tuned in to In My Humble Opinion. We've been speaking with Leslie Cockburn, 5th District Congress hopeful. Take notes. Pay attention.